I know, right?
Ms. Alicio, they are spam. The same one was sent to me like 2 weeks ago.
Mayor, council members, I think we are live officially.
Okay, we're live now, so is staff ready to go? Council ready to go? Wonderful. I am going to call today's special meeting to get
And Mayor, I believe your microphone might be off.
too many things at once there. All right, good. Now I am going to officially call today's special meeting of the Yountville Town Council to order. This is our called Budget Workshop number 3, and it is, I'm going to call it to order exactly at 1 o'clock. So with that, Eddie, can we get roll call, please?
Yes, Mayor. Councilmember Reeves.
Here.
Councilmember Mickey Kent.
Here.
Councilmember Tripp. Here. Vice Mayor Knight.
Here.
Mayor Mueller.
Here. So if everyone could stand and say the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. So, thank you, everyone. And now we'd like to adopt today's agenda. Can we get a motion and a second, please?
Move adoption of today's agenda.
Second.
And now we can all vote.
I don't know.
Oh, you don't have one? Okay. William, I registered as an aye.
You?
Yeah. And Mayor Mueller? Did you have voted yet?
Yeah, did it not come through?
You did not, but I will record it as a yes.
All right, it's like the gremlins are still with me. Okay, there we go. All right, now, do we have any public comment on matters not listed on today's agenda? Seeing no public, we will move on to item number 6, our budget workshop. So this is workshop number 3 for our fiscal year 2023-2024. So I will turn it over to Celia to
Yes.
get us going. Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor. Good afternoon, Mayor and council members. So today we are starting where we left off at Budget Workshop number 2. We will be reviewing special revenue funds, custodial fund, debt service funds, impact fee funds, and capital project funds. Whatever we don't get to today, we can spill over into Budget Workshop number 4, which will be next Thursday, May 25th. Same format as last time. Each department will present the information on their PowerPoint slide, and then we will have time for council questions and comments. Also, like last time, the presentation of the PowerPoint will flow page by page with the budget binders or online staff reports. So are we ready to get started?
We are ready to go. Thank you.
All right. Starting PowerPoint.
Excuse me.
Okay, so agenda item 6B, special revenue funds, beginning with state gas tax.
And as you will see, we're going to, throughout this PowerPoint, various individuals will be picking up and reporting or talking about the various funds. So I get the first one, Special Revenue Fund, State Gas Tax, Fund 20-4305. This, as you will see today when we move forward through these funds, is one of 3 sources that we have available to us to maintain our street infrastructure, our transportation infrastructure. And the way we've sorted this out is in order to maximize our Measure T money to pave the streets with Measure T money, we use the state gas tax fund, which usually comes in around $85,000 to $87,000 a year, for the engineering necessary to put the Measure T projects out to bid and then construct the Measure T project. So using this $87,000 gives us $87,000 more to put actual pavement on the road. So this fund is pretty simple. We just use it to hire our consulting engineer that prepares the plan specs and estimates for the project that we then put out to bid. So it's a very efficient way of using both the gas tax fund and the Measure T funds.
No questions or comments? Okay.
Nope. Keep going until
The next fund
the
is
people looking up and raising their hands.
the next one is the Public Educational and Government Fund 21. This is a franchise fee revenue fund that we receive for broadcasting to our cable channel. So for this fiscal year, 2023-2024, for the next fiscal year, we do not have anything planned, but we always put aside $5,000 in case we need to do any maintenance work to the audio and visual equipment here in the chambers. Again, as a reminder, this is declining revenue due to customers cutting the cord, as they say, so no more cable. So, but for now, we still receive some funding, which helps maintain all the AV equipment here. So, any questions you may have, please let me know.
Vice Mayor.
Oh, I'm sorry, thank you.
I'll get to you.
It looks like this fund, we get it between,
Vice Mayor.
$12,000 or $13,000 a year. And so we have a balance in the fund right now of $50,000. So I'm just wondering, are there other video conferencing or live streaming equipment, microphones we could expend in the next year to help that we talked a little bit about better communication on the dais. I mean, can we look at some projects to maybe use some of those funds in the next fiscal year?
That's correct. Any projects that you want to use with this money, specifically for the broadcasting purposes, that money can be used for that. So in this case, you mentioned microphones. It's a good example of how you can use that fund. So yes, that can be done for that. Where it might get a little bit grayish, and I'm not sure it will be special equipment. Like we mentioned something that kind of announces somehow the person that wants to speak in the dais. So let's say I'm not sure. I will have to ask the town attorney, because that one, I'm not sure how to relate it specifically to the broadcasting aspect of it. Microphones, we know that we use for the sound to go through, but an item like that, I'm not sure if that can be covered by the PEG fund.
Maybe you could ask them that, would be great. And is
Yes.
there any other things you envision that we could help the meeting processing you've thought about we need that we could fund this next fiscal year?
Not right now, but what I can tell you is the microphones, we have paid to replace those microphones. And we actually have in the back. What is missing is a piece of hardware that is not, the supply is not here. So our contractor, Napa Valley TV, has ordered it, has been paid for, but we're just waiting for it to arrive. So once that item arrives, we'll have the new wireless microphones here available for the public. It's here. It's just that specific device to transmit the sound. It's just in low supply, so that's why we have not received it.
But that's in this year's fiscal
Correct.
budget, not next year's.
Correct. So we don't anticipate any other changes to the chambers right now, as far as we can tell.
Okay.
Councilmember McKee Camp.
Ooh, Mayor, I was going to ask about a light kind of call screen as well, and these are probably not within this budget, but we have all kind of commented that these chairs could use a refresh, so that might be in.
I believe that actually comes out of the Human Resources Department, so we may have something. There's a time frame for replacement of items such as the chairs, so
Yeah,
that might
hard
be in the
costs.
queue. So I'll find out for you.
Okay, thank you.
Councilmember Tripp.
I saw somewhere that we pay a fee for the public access television. Somewhere I remember seeing 29,000. So we pay.
Can you bring your microphone down?
Yeah, sorry, my hearing is kind of off. So we pay that. What fund does that come out of? This would be payment.
Yes,
to
that's
have,
for
I
cable
assumed it was-
casting.
Right. Wouldn't this be a fund for that, or no?
No, that's housed in the town clerk department in the general fund.
In the general fund.
Contract
Okay.
services.
But in theory, we could use this fund for that, right? Because just based on the description, it says covered capital expenses for public access television. So maybe that's not capital.
It's not technically capital, it's operating, but it is something we could look into to see if maybe it would be applicable.
Okay. Well, we don't. What's the total in here now?
The fund balance is estimated to be about 41,000 at the end of this current fiscal year.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Reeves.
So I understand that this is for broadcasting purposes, but we sometimes broadcast from the community center. And it would seem, from my experience, that the microphones at the community center often don't work.
Okay.
So maybe we could look at that system
Yeah.
as well.
We can definitely look into that, adding those new microphones for the community center. So as long as we're broadcasting, yes, it will fall in that category. So we can definitely look into adding new microphones for them too as well.
Anything else on this fund? Okay, keep moving.
Next one is the Public Art Program Fee Fund. The source of this is actually a 1% of valuation on commercial building permits. So anybody that applies for a commercial building permit, 1% of the valuation of their project feeds this fund. It is the fund that pays for the art walk. I want to back up and say the applicants that do have to pay that fee, we accept it as a deposit until they tell us that they're not going to do the art and they're going to let us keep their deposit. We have yet to have an applicant who has decided to install the art themselves, but that is a choice that we do offer. They typically pay the fee and then it feeds this fund and then we do the art program ourselves. It funds the art walk, the maps, the audio tour, the stipends for the artists, and we currently budget 4 or 5 sculptures a year out of this. Last year we did 8, and the funds fluctuate depending on the building permit applications that we've received on any given year. And I also want to point out that when our town capital improvement projects qualify for a commercial building permit, we also pay this fee. So we do as we say and as we do.
Any questions on this fund? Seeing none, we're moving on.
All right, it's my turn. So the Housing Grant Fund, my understanding is that the town has been awarded 3 large grants for home rehabilitation activity, and all these housing grants provide funding for the home rehabilitation program, which again funds home improvement projects for low-income eligible residents to bring their homes up to current building standards. To date, we have 42 projects throughout town that have received funding through these programs. We also have the tenant-based rental assistance program, which ended just in June of 2022. This fund does continue to support the owner-occupied rehabilitation program. There's budgeted $100,000 federal home grant revenue, and expenditure represents the expected amount of grant revenue the town will receive and use from the $500,000 federal grant awarded in January of 2023.
Questions, comments?
I have a
Okay,
question.
Councilmember Reeves?
Since we funded a rental assistance program through this fund before, what would the parameters be if we wanted to continue some sort of assistance or creating, I don't know, more availability of money for like the farm worker housing project, something like that?
I'll take a stab at that, and perhaps interim town manager can weigh in. The TBRA previously stemmed from COVID, and so that was established to help during COVID when a lot of people had loss of income. I think that if the council desires to do a similar program, you would also have to establish parameters for that program. And decide how it would work, what the eligibility requirements would be, make sure we were in compliance with all state laws, and make sure it was something that this fund could support on an ongoing basis, depending on how long you wanted to offer the program. So that would just be something that council would work with staff to create.
Okay.
Probably alongside Napa Valley Community Housing, who helps administer this for us.
Councilmember McKee-Cant.
I had earmarked that rental assistance as well, thinking of the plea that we had for was it Francine Cohn, and not sure if we could help longtime residents get back on their feet with that, but sounds like there's things that need to be established post-COVID in order to do that. And then back on the overview, I thought it was interesting that the loans are mostly repaid at leisure, or are not, can be paid at leisure, but mostly repaid at time of sale,
Correct.
no matter how long people end up living in their place.
Correct.
That's interesting. It can be a long time for revenue to come back in. Does anybody have a problem with that? Or, I mean, should there be some kind of repayment?
Well, I think the policy and the thought behind it is these are low-income residents. They really don't have the money to do that. These are grant funds that we get to make available to them. So it's not like general fund money. But on the other hand, that, when they move or,
Can the house be inherited by a family member?
no, it has to be paid back at that time.
Okay.
Yeah.
That's what I was
And
thinking.
I believe that the town has limited access to those parameters. I think that is set by the Department of Community Development. In order to receive these grant funds, we have to comply with their stipulations of how the program works. And so if they don't repay it until the time of sale, the town really may not be able to do much about that.
Okay.
But it seems like we've had this program in place quite a while, and there has been sufficient turnover where we have new applicants. We usually have to send out a lot of notices to let people know they're available. I'm not familiar ever having a wait list yet.
That's good.
So far, and we do keep getting additional grant money. These are really great programs that, because of our contract, they extend to Yountville. So
Okay. It's just the words at their leisure. I haven't had many loans that had those terms in them, so.
Yeah.
And
Just
just to
questioning.
also point out that the $100,000 is a plugged amount of what we estimate. We could use up to the full $500,000. We just don't see a whole lot of activity coming through. But also you'll see in the revenues that for the past 3 fiscal years, we have received repayments of loans. So it does happen fairly often.
So that would be a policy decision that, we could do, but we kind of set it at that, and it seemed that, no one seems to need more than that.
That's good.
So,
Okay, thank you.
anyway, Councilmember Tripp, you have a question?
Yes, my question, I do understand this is administered by the City of Napa Housing Authority, but this $500,000 that we got in January is a very large influx compared to previous years where, it was more in the $100,000 range. At least that's sort of what I'm reading. And I just wondered, I really wonder how many people are aware of this, because I've never actually seen mention of it. And so I guess I have a very simple question, whether we could, perhaps, I understand it's the Napa Housing Authority, make sure that it's publicized here in Yountville, especially since we have such a large influx of funding available. And just walking around, I think there probably are some residents who might be able to use it. So that would just be my only request or suggestion.
Yeah,
Absolutely, yes. We can certainly do outreach.
And we have in the past, and that's what we've just found is, when and I certainly keep letting people know it's a great idea, but it seems to be, people in the mobile home parks that have really taken advantage of it. And sometimes, they're getting upgrades and they tell a neighbor. And then, so it's kind of this word of mouth that even happens over there. So.
Right. Although, just looking at the expenditures, so in 21, it was 93,000, and then in 22, it was 46,000, and this year it's estimated at 57. So not a lot of money has been going out. So I guess I'm just saying, I know people are aware, but maybe we could up the effort, because I do think people could really use it, especially in this day and age.
And it might even help sometimes with grants. The more you use, the more you can increase further applications
Right,
in the future.
right.
And so if somebody wanted to open an application, they would come here to town hall to get information? Because I have a neighbor that a tree went through her whole carport, and she doesn't have an insurance. She can't afford to fix it, but she's also very proud and doesn't want help. But so where would she report to?
I believe
We could get
she
her
would
to.
start with the town, and we could connect her with the housing authority, who would then process the application.
Yes, that's,
Okay.
I would agree with that.
Okay, thank you. I'll let her know.
Good. Vice Mayor?
I just wanted to follow up with Councilmember Tripp. So in 2018, we got 500,000, and in January of 2023, we were awarded another 500,000. But when you look at the budget, it's not there. Does Napa Housing Authority? Thank you. Oh, wow, now I hear it.
Now we hear you.
She runs the TV, so she can tell the audio
Wow.
back there.
She just came out of nowhere. So where are those funds held? Are they held in Napa?
No, it's a grant program, so we are awarded the 500, but we don't actually receive the 500 until after the project is complete, and it is then reimbursed to the town. So that's why you don't see the full 500 coming in as revenue. It's a grant repayment of the project. So the town pays for the project and gets reimbursed.
And those are held by a state agency or something, or a
Correct.
federal
HCD.
agency. So in our fiscal 23-24 goals and objectives, it says work with the Housing Authority of Napa to explore options for increasing utilization of grant funds, and we've all asked about that right now. Who is the person in our town or staff that's responsible for that relationship and trying to explore other options for increasing utilization of funds?
That would be the planning department.
Okay. So, do we have one of your other staff that you work with that's in their job description to basically reach out and try to maybe find ways how we market these funds or provide more information to maybe, if it's maybe potentially the Rancho de Napa or Buena Vista or just anywhere in town, how we reach out to people and give them information about it? Or
I believe that would fall under my job description to reach out with them. Again, I've met with them a couple of times already since I've been here. So we have that open line of communication. So it's just a matter of knowing what the town really wants us to pursue. And we can move forward with something and start those discussions.
Okay, so could we use some of these funds for marketing and provide to the community to provide information, create flyers, or?
No.
I wouldn't
No.
think so, but again, it's something we can check up on.
Yeah,
Okay.
I believe it's only for the reimbursement of the rehabilitation projects, but general fund planning or community promotions, those departments could manage the marketing costs.
Is there a clock on this money in terms of how soon we have to? Is it in this fiscal year or?
I don't believe it's fiscal year. I think it is calendar year or possibly.
It might be
Multiple
grant
calendar
year. Yeah,
year-
I think
grant
it depends
years,
on
yes.
I think it's an 18-month grant. Sometimes
Okay.
that time changes. And this is a lot of interest. Basically, this grant program brings in the contractors, so they've got approved contractors, and there is quite a few things that are allowable: windows, air conditioning, sometimes roofs and things like that. And they know a lot about there's actually a state law that governs mobile home parks. The town doesn't really do that, and so they work pretty closely with that agency as well, understanding that. And then, the contractors come in and actually do all the work. You don't have to hire them yourselves, and then that they build the grant program, and it's a very seamless process. And, from all reports I've heard, very high quality work.
So just to follow up again, so since our Housing Standing Committee has suggested that the Napa Housing Authority and Napa Valley Community Housing meet with council and give us an update on the projects they're managing in town, and and it would be best probably done as also an introduction to our new town manager when that person eventually is here, that maybe could we maybe plan in a couple months to come back where then you will have communicated with the housing authority and figured out, and we can figure out more ways to kind of reach out to residents in town to expend that money before it expires.
I'd be happy to do that.
And maybe as a part of that conversation we have with them when they come and meet the town manager and report on what they manage in town, that we could also talk to them about that then.
Yes, and I've already had that discussion with both of the groups that at some point here in the near future, we'll be having them come do a presentation for council.
And ask how we can better reach out and help people that maybe are, I understand that you're proud and you've got some damage, but, there's definitely, I'm sure people in this community could use those funds. So thank you.
Sure.
And just that they do typically come and give a twice-a-year update. Is that it to the council? So it's a regularly occurring event as well. Do you know when the next scheduled one is?
I do not know.
Okay, so if it might just fall within that scheduled time anyway, but that's something that we usually get routine updates as well.
It
So
would be good if it was this summer then, so it would be an introduction for the new town manager and for.
yeah, they haven't been here in a while, so I wouldn't be surprised if it was something that would be coming up fairly soon anyway.
Thank you.
But, yeah.
I'd like to really support that idea that we have a chance to meet the people from the Housing Authority and the Napa Valley Community Housing, because this is becoming a bigger issue for us. The whole affordable housing and making sure people have adequate housing.
Thank you.
Okay.
I-
Councilmember McKee-Camp.
Thank you. I would like the opportunity to arrange a meeting at the clubhouse at Rancho de Napa sometime, just an hour where people could come in and get more information.
That's a great idea. Good.
Like this one neighbor does laundry for French Laundry, and she works like 6:30 to 6:30 p.m., 6:30 a.m. to p.m.
And we have done that in the past as an outreach
Yeah,
as well.
I
So putting that
coming to
on a
them-
regular basis, I think makes sense.
Okay, thank you.
Time.
All right. Are we done with this item? Any more questions, comments? Okay, keep moving.
So we're back to paving our streets. Measure T is our big ticket item that you hear us annually doing projects. You approve projects and then we put them out to bid and then we award them and move them on. Just as a reminder, Measure T is a half-cent sales tax measure that replaced the flood half-cent sales tax measure in 2018. It's a half-cent. The town receives our portion annually. It typically is in the range of $525,000, so we budget our projects to that size. We are currently adjusting our project sizes in order to make sure we have enough of a fund balance to do Washington Street, what we refer to as Washington Street North. So you'll remember we just did Washington Street South from Yount to the south town limits. From Yount North needs to be done. So we're managing our projects in a way that we will have sufficient fund balance to do Washington Street North in the coming schedule. And so the near-term project for this year is Heritage Way. It's scheduled for a grind and overlay in this coming year. Next slide, please. Just to give an example, we did Harvest Court in last year's budget, and when we say grind and overlay, they bring equipment in, they take the top 2/10 of the street, 2 inches of the street off, and then they put a surface treatment down, and then they put all new asphalt down. So it provides essentially a brand new street. And so that left to right is before, during, and after, and you can see the difference.
We got a quick question. So is
Yes,
that because
Vice Mayor.
that street is, sometimes in the past we've just done slurry seals, but is that not a regular type of repair we do anymore? Is this one old enough to where you need to go down and reset the base? Or?
Yes. So we, combined with the Measure T program, we work with MTC, Metropolitan Transportation Commission, who provides us with the Street Saver software that is the universal software that the 9 Bay Area counties use to rate their streets. And so we have there's a rating system that rates the streets 0 to 100. A brand new street is 100. And then depending on where that street is and what level of cracking it has is how we determine what surface treatment to place on it. So, for example, Heritage is of the age and decay that a grind and overlay is suitable. However, we are just about to put out a microsurface bid project for microsurfacing, which is like a slurry seal over a street that isn't as old but can use a treatment that will extend its life and prevent the cracking. So then we build the bigger repair in later in that street's life.
So if we're going to spend the money, we spend it wisely so we preserve our PCI score, because doing a process that actually could potentially lower the PCI because it doesn't deal with the wear and tear on the road already, is that we do the best procedure that preserves that or increases our PCI.
Yes. And you hear us talk about it frequently, but our PCI stands for Pavement Condition Index, and it's 0 to 100, and we are currently right at the 80 mark, which is definitely the highest in Napa Valley, and we're very proud of that. And the Measure T funding is of the size that it is perfect for our size town to do a significant project every year that allows us to maintain that high level of quality on our streets.
But if we get over a certain index, and aren't we pretty close to that, then we can also use some of those MTC funds for sidewalks? Is that?
We can, yes. And we can use some Measure T funds for sidewalks, but you'll see momentarily that we do use SB1 money for our sidewalks.
Yeah, but I always like to use other people's monies. But
yes. What
is that number? Is it over? Is it 80 and over, and we're at 79 or something? Are we getting close, though?
So we're right. We haven't had our official rating by MTC.
Okay.
By our calculations, we're at 79 point something.
Right.
So conversationally, we're rounding up to 80. But once we get our official MTC rating at 80, then yes.
Then we can use. Okay, good.
Yes.
I'm rooting for 80.
Yes.
Right. Any other questions on
Quick question.
this item? Yes, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. In this year's objectives, do we plan to do Yountville Crossroad? So the question I have about that is that I can't remember when, 15, 20 years ago, we tried some type of colored material to designate the difference between the bike path and the road. Just didn't do well. It seemed like it peeled away pretty darn quickly. So is that what we'll do? Is that a part of this process when we're repairing or whatever we'll do for Yountville Crossroad, that we're coming up with some type of alternative materials to designate bike versus roadway? Or
This year's project includes Yountville Crossroad, where we're doing a microsurfacing, so not doing a grind and overlay, not fully changing the street. But we will restripe it. Now, when it's time to make any differences between type of material for bike lanes versus road, that's better done when you do a full repair like a grind and overlay. But this year we're doing the microsurfacing.
Okay, and that's what you're talking about. Okay, that makes sense, because I'm not sure what's left of that anymore now that I'm thinking about it, driving out there, is that material that was used kind of peeled away and was not very effective in differentiating the road. But I guess as part of this process, you'll stripe and provide the information that designates the bicycle lane, and because that road always concerns me, because people are moving quickly when they're coming into town or leaving town, and if you're walking or biking, you better be on guard. So
yeah, the project will put back all the required bike lanes, bike symbols, and arrows that clearly indicate where the bike lanes are.
all right.
So any possible coordination with the county so that we can not have a clear demarcation to where Yountville ends and our work ended in the county? I know we've tried this in the past. It just didn't work out.
We have communication with them, but we don't have any current discussions about that at this time. And since we're just doing a microsurface, they recently did a similar treatment to one direction of Yountville Crossroads. So we don't know where the other direction fits into their schedule right now.
I'll have to send Steve a letter or text. Maybe I'll find out something for you. So, all right, thanks. Anything else on this item?
Thank you.
Nope. Okay, move on.
The next one is along the same lines. This is SB1. It's also special per gallon fuel excise tax. Our share is around $67,000 a year. And what we like to use this money for is curb, gutter, and sidewalk work in advance of the Measure T project. So if we know we're going to do a certain street with Measure T, we will mobilize a contractor separate from the Measure T contractor to do the concrete work in advance of the Measure T project. And the reason that we do that is because concrete work is completely different than street paving work, and the town has had experiences in the past where both of those scopes of work were combined, and the paving contractor couldn't finish a street or portions of streets because their concrete subcontractor was not mobilizing. And so we've learned that if we can use this money to hire our concrete contractor directly, and we have foresight to do the concrete work, the ramps and or curb and gutter work in advance of a paving project, it is much smoother for the paving project when the paving project comes along. And again, maximizes our Measure T monies specifically for asphalt on the streets.
So just a general comment I want to make. I know we have separate funds for our franchise fees, and I did that just, so we could really see how much, we had over time. But, in my mind, this is, if there's projects that you would like to tap into those franchise fees, this is a perfect nexus, because that's why we have those, because 3 heavy garbage trucks once a week really wearing down our road is perfect for that. So
Okay.
Keep an eye on that fund, because they'll have, some pretty significant funds in there within a few years.
Yes, and it'll be a slide here in a few slides, I believe.
Yeah, okay, great. Councilmember McKee-Cant.
Thank you. The question that I have is the work that's being done on Hopper Creek over the bridge on Fennell that involves some sidewalk over the bridge and also the fencing. Is that tied in any way to this, or is that coming from a different fund?
Are you referring to Mulberry, the work on the...
Yeah, did I say Fennell? I'm sorry, yeah, Mulberry.
So the fence work at Mulberry is coming out of the operational fund of the Municipal Operations Department.
Okay. Is it more fencing, or are we doing a bridge like the other?
No, we're just
Really?
replacing what I like to refer to as the hardest working chain link fence in town. That fence has been there since that subdivision was built in the late 60s, but we had been receiving a lot of input over the last year that chain link fence is no longer up to Yountville's aesthetic standards, and so we responded to that and are replacing that fence with our town standard style fence. So it's simply an aesthetic project to improve the look.
It's probably not the right meeting because this is budget, but why is there a fence? Why isn't it just an open bridge like all of the other bridges?
It's an open channel, and similar to a swimming pool situation, you don't want people on the sidewalk or kids from the sidewalk falling into an open channel.
Safety.
I think most of the other places are fenced, or you don't, maybe I have it
The
wrong.
one that's behind, goes behind ad hoc?
So I will say we are getting off.
Yeah.
We can have this conversation offline. I'm happy to have that.
I
Yeah.
mean, all of our bridges seem open.
Yes.
All right.
As somebody who lives on Mulberry, and all my neighbors, thank you. It looks very nice and did a good job.
All right, are we done with this item? Yes, can we move on? Thank you.
And Measure T equivalent fund, when Measure T was adopted, it was required, the ordinance requires that 6.67% of other money be set aside for Class 1 bicycle improvements as identified in the countywide bicycle plan. The 6.67% is a combined number for all the agencies in the county, and Yountville has performed our own projects, and the example is the Hopper Creek Bridge project next to Oak Circle Park, and the value of that project by far exceeds our 6.7% obligation. So we currently don't have expenditures in this fund, scheduled in this fund, because we by far exceed our obligation.
Great. Councilmember Reeves.
I just had a question. Would this fund be something that helps us sort of designate bike lanes throughout town. And I know that a lot of cities, and I think we use it up at the north end, have designated bike lanes in green.
This fund is not eligible for that because it has to be Class 1 bike lanes. Class 1 bike lanes are completely separate from the road system.
Okay.
Class 1, you can take a look at down Fennell as if Class 1, correct?
If it's adjacent to the road, no. If Class 1 is independent from the road.
Oh, it's totally independent from the road. We have 0,
Yeah.
except the bike path.
Except for the Vine Trail
Right.
and the Hopper Creek path qualifies as a Class 1 bike path.
Okay, thanks. Any other questions on Measure T equivalent? Okay, keep rolling.
Moving on to this big fund, Fire and Emergency Medical Services Fund 28. It's very small. I think it's one of our oldest town funds. It was an impact fee that we have not imposed on development projects for quite a while, since we do not have any fire emergency related projects that we can connect it to. So for about 10 years, it's been sitting here with a very small balance. The goal for next fiscal year is to transfer this into General Fund Department 013201, which is Fire and Emergency Medical Services, to offset a tiny portion of the amount we paid per the last fire contract that went towards fire engine replacement. That will close out this fund, which is right along the lines of the impact fee study we are currently working through, since the study proposes eliminating this impact fee altogether. So that $30 will go into the general fund.
Great. Now we just have to work on the Talent Lane $28 fund.
That's
All right,
coming up.
Any questions on $30 in this fund? Seeing none, we'll move on.
Okay. And as Mayor Moeller mentioned before, this is Special Revenue Fund 29, Upper Valley Disposal Service franchise fees. This came about when we entered into the JPA with Upper Valley Waste Management and began receiving franchise fees related to garbage collection and recycling services, I think in 2021. We're expecting $165,000 in franchise fee revenue, which is quite sizable. This source of funding can be used for anything the town council determines appropriate. It's currently only used to pay for the annual town cleanup day, which we are expecting to cost about $6,500. So if there's any projects you would like to talk about adding to this fund, there is a little bit of fund balance. We're estimating we'll end this fiscal year with about $121,000 in fund balance.
Would this help out on any delayed road projects? Yeah, right now? Okay, so we'll just keep building it, and I think any of those projects would be great. I'd like to see a nexus to the funds so that, it does come from ratepayers. So if we can really show them that we're using this for the real purposes that why we get them, but it does not require a nexus at all. You're absolutely right. So, just a personal preference. Councilmember Tripp.
Along that line, I was curious as to, I know our town compliance officer is going to, she's not charged with enforcing the compostable rules, but if and when somebody shows they're not composting, and it becomes the law that you have to. So I guess my question is there any possibility that we could use any of these funds to either up the compliance by education or defray some of the cost of the compliance officer for her time spent in terms of enforcing? Because I guess if there's going to be any enforcement, the way I understand it, and I'm sure the mayor knows better, the citation would come from the Upper Valley Waste, but we would have to do any enforcement action. So I guess that's my question. If we, is there any way, as we allocate a lot of situations, the cost of various town staff to particular activities like the water and the sewer, whether we could consider, or maybe there's no need to, of allocating some of the compliance officers' time, both in terms of education and or compliance. So that would be my question.
Well, I'll start. Right now, Upper Valley Disposal does a significant amount of education. I actually asked them to, come and maybe make some general public comment at our last council meeting. You saw that. And I know people are always a little reticent to read those newsletters that we put in the garbage bills, but we actually spend quite a bit of time working on those and trying to reach out to education. And I know everybody hears me talking about SB 1383 a lot, and they, Christy Pistone is now head of government services. They can come out and work with any kind of groups we would like them to do. They would be very happy to do that. And that really kind of comes out of the company. It's actually in the contract that they're required to do that. So if you have anything that you would like them to come out for education, or if we think there's another way to actually put those newsletters that people seem to be reticent to read when they open up their bill, maybe on our website, we could do that because they're already put together. Really wouldn't cost very much to do that. And it's actually, composting's been a law for quite a while. So there's nothing new there. And I'm going to let our compliance officer, not here, anyway, perhaps bring that up for another discussion at a later meeting. But it has been the law. What's happening in January is that now we're mandated by the state to start giving fines. So as I mentioned before, right now the process is we've been doing lots of education, but it's the OOPS tickets that we're doing. So they come by on, Saturday night, and they will notify us when they come out because they're there after the cans are put out, looking in there, and they have, yellow vests, but some people in some communities,
So what do you
like
think,
to call
Mayor?
the sheriff. So anyway.
What do you think, Mayor, though, of defraying some of the cost of our compliance officer, which was a pretty significant investment we made last year, assuming that they will be involved in some of the compliance because it's directly related to this program?
Well, we haven't done any of the fees yet, or the fines yet.
Right, but that's coming, right?
Yeah, that's coming. I'm hoping we don't have fines because right now, there's a lot of good compliance really going on. So maybe a wait and see how much time for compliance. But so everybody make sure, you're putting all your greenways is a very important, and I don't want to get too far off here, a very significant climate action thing that we're doing. All right, thank you, John. I saw the button. Vice Mayor.
Questions about the budget?
Just in terms of talking about organic recycling and this information and maybe using this information to educate the community, is those fines something that will begin sometime this year?
January 1. 2024.
Okay. So maybe what we could do, I guess the challenge I have, wow, thanks. I'll just stick that right here. Mike, it says, turn on my mic. I tell you, I don't go in and look at my water bill that often, or the water bill, because I have it set up with my bank account that it just takes it out. And I know that rate doesn't change, so I have a tendency not to go in there. I'd say it's there every month. So maybe a lot of folks do that and they don't read the newsletter. So I'm just concerned that maybe as a part of this, our funds here, the franchise tax fee, that we might expend some money in either somehow more promotion or advertising, if it's in the Sun or something, getting people up to speed about organic recycling, because it's, just knowing exactly what should go into the green bin versus our waste bin sometimes is a learning curve for me.
And actually, UVDS does spend, and they're obligated to, based on their contract. And Sometimes you flip through it, but in the Sun, those ads are in there pretty routinely, exactly what you're talking about. One was just in with hazardous household waste, for example. So
It's a spot where we let the community know that they could go to just to be, I just would hate to have the come along in January and we're hearing from people that they're getting fines, and maybe those folks were already receiving warning notices of that. But the next question I have, just related to these funds, is that we're doing a cleanup day and the shred it day, but it seems like e-waste is something that always has to occur outside of town. Do we? Is it an opportunity for us to do an e-waste day in Yountville for people, or?
Well, when I do shred it, we have a big e-waste truck, and when we have cleanup day, they pick up e-waste, and that's both advertised in the Sun as well and in the newsletter. And then they the hazardous household waste is up throughout the valley, even not very far at the Pistone Winery. They have to have they bring in special companies to do that.
Yeah, I was just thinking in terms of, it seems like people generally create more e-waste after the first of the year. You know, people are purchasing things around the holidays, and so it just seems like if maybe we thought about if we could help the residents by doing an e-waste sooner after the first of the year, it might help have people be able to get rid of that properly. So
okay, so yeah, maybe we'll take this up with the JPA. Maybe you can come and give us some public comment. I'll let you know when the next meeting is.
I'll write them a letter. Thank you.
Councilmember McKee can.
Got my little light on here. A question, some of the promo, maybe, Eric, your idea of outreach, maybe sometimes instead of in writing, it can be a video. And as we're doing our little educational videos for who we are and what we're doing on the council, maybe we can also include some segments like that. John's really good at using videos on Nextdoor, and some people that don't open those bills, maybe they'll click on that and see it. So just an idea there. Then since some of this fund can be used for streets due to the heavy garbage trucks, I'm wondering, like off properties that are not town jurisdiction, say Mission Street, I mean, what do we do for property that's private?
That's essentially the same as somebody's driveway. So the town could not spend public funds on private property for a private street.
Okay. Those trucks go wailing through there. Thanks.
I just have one other
Councilmember
question.
Reeves.
This is to do with the expenditure of the $6,500 for Yountville Day cleanup. And I was wondering, because the Upper Valley offers you 2 times a year to come and pick up large items and things, and I bet not even half of the people in town utilize that service, that I'm wondering why we're paying the $6,500 when they should actually be giving us the whole day as part of what they normally do. So that might be another letter to the Upper Valley Disposal about that particular expenditure.
I had a similar question because...
Councilmember Tripp.
I'm sorry. On their trucks, they say in Napa you can put, there's a limit, but several times a year you could put stuff out and they take it. And the Upper Valley trucks say we have that option too, but since we don't, because I've called them, I assumed that the cleanup day was in lieu of having that option of putting stuff out. So I'm kind of wondering, like you, if normally a customer gets that option and our option instead is to do the cleanup day, why we would be paying for the cleanup day. Is that sort of what you were asking?
Kind of. Well, that people should be able to call in and get things picked up, but they must budget a certain amount per population for pickup. So whatever doesn't get expended, I would think covers the $6,500 for the cleanup day. And it just seems like that's a place where Upper Valley Disposal is not, I don't know,
Right, when I first moved here, because
I
in
can't
Napa, you
explain
could
it.
put stuff out, I called them and they said, no, we don't have that service, but I'm not sure that's true, Upper Valley. But I just wanted to add one other thing, the thing I would
Well,
find.
can I just,
go ahead.
we do have that service. We are outside of budget, but we're technically in there because we're trying to get somebody else to pay for the cleanup day, that this is the only community in the JPA that requested. So I won't go too much farther. But
Yeah, I was going to offer that the cleanup day is an event that the town looks forward to, and it's happened frequently enough that people anticipate it, and I think rely on it independent of calling and asking for the individual service. So I think it's just a Yountville service that our residents enjoy, and that is the value is
Oh,
there.
I'm not saying we shouldn't do it. I'm saying that Upper Valley Disposal gets kind of a bonus that we don't call them individually. They just pick it up once a year. So it seems like it's odd for us to pay extra and only receive
Well,
one
yes.
service. So I'm just saying.
Right. Well, yes.
I can bring those statistics back. It actually is pretty well used in Yountville. We get those numbers, which are also in all of our newsletters, that maybe putting this stuff on our website is going to take care of all this, because people do use those opportunities to free, and this is something that's actually pretty new that, again, we put in the contract.
Oh, maybe when I called before, it was the old company because they said they didn't do it. But the other thing that I would be interested, if anybody else, is the hazardous materials, especially the paint. I know there was a day recently where you could drive up to St. Helena, but if there was an opportunity to do it in Yountville, similar to the electronics, it would be really enormously helpful.
And that's, we routinely rotate the hazardous household waste events, and it was just at Pisoni Winery, the same day as the garage sale, so it was
When was the last time it was in Yountville, Margie?
a
I don't
couple
think
years
it's been
ago.
here since I lived here, or 5 years?
No, we've had a couple of years ago.
Okay.
We used to collect hazardous waste at the town's our incorporation yard, but that become an issue of holding it, and where we.
It's also a safety issue because we had random people arriving at a
Right.
secure site and leaving things that didn't qualify as hazardous.
Right. Yeah.
So I would encourage the council to focus on the money part
Yes.
of this conversation.
Well, I guess the suggestion is maybe we have the funds, and there's certainly enough funds in there that I thought years and years ago we had 2 cleanup days a year, or just that we have the funds available to do the type of recycling, e-waste, hazardous waste events in the community more often, to help residents get rid of that so it doesn't sit in garages. And I mean, those type of things are whether it's hazardous waste is a liability. So I'm supportive of doing it more often if we can help get that material out of the community.
So would a majority of the council direct staff to
Ask Christy Pistoni to come and give a full presentation on how many tons, where they
Yes.
all are, how it works, because, we have to work through them and their special agency. We can't just get rid of hazardous house. It's very regulatory controlled, so maybe we need a full council presentation on how garbage works, or, we have JPAs, meetings like monthly too, so we can have that education there, or they would be happy to come and make formal presentations where you can ask lots of questions and get actually tonnage reports and how many pickup items occur in Yountville versus St. Helena, and how that's all used, and how much people actually get rid of. So that
Mayor?
be the action item. Hopefully it's going to be related to the budget. Councilmember Reeves?
So,
Our attorney isn't here, so John and I are trying to do our best.
right, but if we're going to ask for a presentation, I would like it to include the possibility of this educational component into it, and a possibility of a really great program for them, which is this traveling household hazardous waste option for outlying communities like Yountville.
Right, and so in answer to the question that John asked, is anybody else in support of that? Looking into the specific option of a hazardous waste for Yountville, I would support that option. I do understand it's highly regulated, but the question is whether it could be done. And
I will
my
take
guess
that
it
up
could
at our
be done.
next JPA meeting, and when I report out on the next garbage meeting, I'll bring that information back.
And Mayor, my only point, and maybe I'll stay away from drinking Coca-Cola during meetings, is that we have the money here, so let's provide services for the community. And so that's right in budget. I'm very supportive of us if it means another day or rotating the days more often. So we use these funds to make our community safer. Let's expend the money. So,
If I could add that if there is no concrete idea right now for something to plug into the budget, the funds are available. So if something, a couple months, project comes along, we can do a budget adjustment to utilize these funds.
but this isn't like, I'm sorry, Mayor, this isn't like CIP. The funds are there, so we don't have to necessarily designate it in the next fiscal year. We could say, in 3 months, let's just do an event, and the funds are there, right? And then we plan it and expend it.
Correct, but we would do a budget adjustment to appropriate the amount of
Right.
funds that you would like to use.
And we could do that just before we do the event or
Correct.
something like that.
Yes.
Thank you.
And it's very likely it won't cost you any money at all. So I will work that out. Not a problem. We're always looking for helping out and all Upper Valley Waste Management customers. Are we ready to move forward, or any last budget related on Fund 29? Seeing none. Okay, it's gone.
Okay. Fund 30, CASP Certification and Training Fund. So this is a fee mandated by the California Division of the State Architect for use in maintaining oversight of the Certified Access Specialist Program, or CASP. We collect the fee upon business license issuance and renewals. We retain a small portion, and we forward the rest to the state for their use. The amount we keep must be used towards ADA improvements, so each year we transfer the town portion into Fund 50 to help cover the costs of the annual ADA improvements program. And it's typically between $1,500 and $2,000 that we transfer into Fund 50.
Any questions on Fund 30? Mayor, we're moving on. Thank you.
All right, on to the Housing Opportunity Program. This program was established to support the development of affordable housing units by providing some town funding assistance for affordable housing construction. This effort provides local lower-income residents and workers in the hospitality and agricultural industries the opportunity to live in the community in which they work. In terms of the total budget for this program, there's a little over $73,000, and budget highlights include the Community Action of Napa Valley Homeless Shelter, the Fair Housing Napa Valley, and the Farm Worker Housing Program. About $60,000 is budgeted to continue the contract with City of Napa Housing Authority for, again, housing management services. The revenue budgeted typically represents amounts paid for affordable housing fair share in lieu fees. Again, typically, additional impact fee revenue depends on whether or not entitlement applications will be received during the fiscal year. And again, as you all know, development is limited, and in terms of the number of projects, and timing is difficult to predict for projects. So if you have any questions.
Any questions here?
I do have a
Councilmember Reeves?
question. I just am struck by the amount of money that we pay to administer the program and the small amount that we contribute to local housing advocates. It feels like that should be reversed in some way, or at least beefed up on what we're contributing to Community Action Homeless Shelter, the Farm Worker Housing Project, and the Fair Housing of Napa Valley. It just feels like that's a small contribution.
Staff would like to address that.
Well, I'll just offer my limited knowledge. If you look at the expenditures for the prior fiscal years, Of the 13,000 we typically budget, we've only spent about 6, and that I believe is for fair housing Napa Valley. The other 2 never request funding, so it's not, I don't think, for a lack of the town giving, it's just the lack of them requesting. I think we could maybe do some outreach to the programs and see if they are in need. As far as other programs to add, I'm not really sure. Maybe John or Irene have ideas of what other programs we could help fund. And
I don't have specific programs that we can fund, but my recommendation would be that the Housing Standing Committee take this on as an agenda item in order to explore it more, and then offer, with staff, we can do some more research and offer more information. But we can put it on a future Housing Standing Committee agenda item to discuss in detail.
That would be great. Thank you.
and the Housing Authority could probably provide, it could be another resource for us. Yeah.
Councilmember Tripp.
Yes, I was just going to, I had the same thought as Director of Finance, that when Napa Valley Community Housing and the Housing Authority come, that would be a really good topic. Recently, and I know Eric also has, and a number of others, been aware of a situation with a community member, and there's a pretty dire need. So, but you need to be an expert. My limited experience is it's kind of a complicated area. So that would be great if they could come. And if and I'll just say this now without getting too far off the budget, if we could have a chance to send you some questions for that presentation, that would be really helpful. Thank you.
Okay, anything else on this item? Seeing none, can we keep moving, please?
All right, so we're on to Measure S Affordable and Workforce Housing Fund. It was in 2018 that the Yountville voters approved Measure S, which increased the transit occupancy tax, or TOT, by 1% to support workforce and affordable housing efforts. Again, it's a special tax for funding programs and services related to workforce and affordable housing, and may only be used for that purpose. It includes projects within and outside jurisdictional boundaries of the town of Yountville, from what I understand. Again, the total expenditure budget is about $100,000, which is earmarked for a potential draft of additional dwelling units, or ADUs, for the forgivable loan program. Some of the budget highlights include the town anticipates collecting about $647,000 in Measure S revenue. The fund balance as of March 31st, 2023 is a little over $2 million. And again, the town council may utilize this fund for projects, for allowable projects if the opportunity rises.
Okay. Questions, comments of staff on Fund 71-1600? Councilmember Tripp.
I thought we had a really good presentation at the last meeting on this topic and where the money was spent. So, yeah. My only question is, so the $100,000 is actually put aside for that issue of studying the forgivable program and how that might work?
Correct. It's a placeholder. I think the prior town manager had gotten a start on that program, and it's just in a holding pattern at this point. And this is to allow it to move forward with whatever costs may be associated.
Okay. Yeah, that's a great program idea.
Seeing nobody else, can we keep moving? Oh, did you want to say something? No. Oh, okay. Sorry. So I saw a hand move.
So tied back to Measure T replaced Measure A, which was the funding for flood projects up and down the valley. And so Measure A maintenance fund is the remnant of the Measure A projects, and it is the fund that provides money for us to maintain the flood project that Measure A put in place. And so our total budget is around $175,000, and we intend to use that for maintaining and repairing portions of the flood project that were constructed with Measure A. The HydroFlush, the drainage infrastructure project, is specific to Fennell Road. There's 3 large diameter pipes that help with the Fennell Road weir that take the water from Harbor Creek to Beard Ditch. They have to be cleaned, and hydroflushing is the way to clean them. They have a fair amount of debris in them right now, so we need, after this last year's storm, so we're going to clean those. The flood basin, where the floodwaters from the inside the flood wall collect and get pumped out, it has a fence around it, and similar to a pool, we need to maintain a 6-foot fence around it. That fence is falling apart, so we intend on replacing that. And then if we discover any flood wall maintenance that's needed in the coming year, we put some money aside for that.
Okay. Any questions on Fund 75? Yes, Vice Mayor.
So with all the rains we've had this year, in the past thank you. And because of the rains we've had this year, generally in the past between and Hopper Creek, between Mulberry and Oak Circle, have gone and trenched out a lot of sediment that's in that. Is that a part of the funds here that we would use? We could use that.
We typically schedule that for different with general fund monies. We don't typically use this because it's not specific to the flood project, but we do have it scheduled for that work. We do have money and that work scheduled, but it falls outside the Measure A.
It's not. It wasn't ever Measure A.
No, that part.
It wasn't
that
designated in that
Correct.
measure.
Correct.
Okay, but that's something we'll do this year. We'll probably.
Correct.
We typically do. Thank you.
Anything else? Okay, Celia, keep us moving.
So this one, both Talent Lane and Mesa Court in the late 80s, early 90s, as things were being developed there, local drainage infrastructure needed to be improved. So the town developed 2 small benefit districts for the purposes of putting drainage and storm drainage infrastructure in that area. So the benefit district funded those projects and has been collecting a little bit of money over time. Our goal right now is to identify some maintenance to those facilities that were installed by this fund and then close out both those funds.
Close them out. Great.
Yes, that's our goal for this year.
Great. Wonderful. So the benefit is not incurring any revenue anymore.
I don't believe so, no.
A little bit of interest earnings, very small amount, only because they have fund balance.
Okay. All right. Great. Questions on
Yes.
Talent Lane and Mesa Court? Councilmember Tripp. I'll get to you next.
So this benefit district fund, this would have been the point of establishing the district would have been that those impacted properties in the district would have contributed these funds towards these
Correct.
improvements?
Correct.
Okay. So, and maybe you said this, so if there's not a use for the funds, eventually they would be returned to the property owners?
So the funds will be used to perform repairs and or maintenance on the facilities that the fund created.
Okay.
And then once the funds are expended, the funds will be closed.
And does the town get the opportunity to charge, having 2 professional licensed engineers on our staff, overhead for that? Your supervision and development of these projects and all that?
I don't believe so.
Okay.
We could come back with a little bit more information about these. I think back in the 90s, I don't believe these were impact fees. I think it was a gift of funds that then created this benefit district. And I think that there were stipulations around that gift of funds.
Okay. So this goes back to the 90s, so
Yes,
that's a long
very
time.
old.
Okay,
Very
so I withdraw my question.
Okay. Seeing no more questions.
just a quick-
Vice Mayor, sorry, I forgot.
I'm sorry. Thank you. So for Talent Lane as a private road, it's unless the property owners there, I mean, there's not enough funds there to create a road or bring that into the city street. as long as they're happy that it remains a private road, whether or not that road is accessible to emergency service equipment, then they just accept that responsibility, that the town doesn't at any point doesn't plan to improve that street, or
Correct. It's a private road, so we have no jurisdiction there. We have an easement right to access the water, sewer, and storm drain infrastructure there. And so we have rights to drive on Talent Lane and work on public infrastructure, but the road itself is private, and we have no responsibility or obligation to work on it or repair it. So the Talent Lane property owners, if they wish to widen it or do repairs to it, they would have to do it amongst themselves. This particular item, it was specific to storm drainage improvements through that area.
Well, Mesa was because there was an open ditch there at one point before the development on Staggs View Lane was done, and then I think it was
so
covered over. But
the Mesa storm drain improvements have to travel through the Talent Lane area to get to ultimately to Bear Ditch, so that's why the two are tied together.
So just generally, the town using some of these funds has done whatever it needed to keep fully updated the water, sewer, and storm drainage. We do that when we're working projects in that area. Some of these funds would help do that work within our easement.
These funds created that infrastructure, and now we would use these funds to do any repairs that are necessary, because it's been since the 1990s that it was constructed, and then the funds would be closed.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Seeing nothing else, next, please.
Okay, we are moving to agenda item 6C, the custodial fund. This is basically informational for town council. This is a custodial fund because the town collects this revenue, but it is not solely our revenue. We collect it on the behalf of NBTID. We're expecting revenues to be over 1.2 million. Of that, 74% goes through the county, 25% goes to the local TID, and the TID board determines what that budget will, how those funds will be spent. And then the town does retain a 1% administrative cost that gets transferred into the general fund. So again, this is for informational purposes. Approval of the program expenditures are done by the NBTID local governing body, which I think they just met earlier in May. We typically plug an amount. I think it's usually about $260,000, and then based on their final budget, we then amend to reflect the actual costs that they are anticipating. Some of the things that this this TID assessment is used for are things like marketing efforts through the Yountville Chamber of Commerce, which is a separate agreement than the agreement paid for by the general fund. Some funding for Art Stip and Stroll, the International Short Film Festival, Napa Valley Museum, and the Napa Valley Vine Trail. So those are some of the things that they typically spend the funds on.
Do you have any percentage of the contribution to those specific items that we're talking about?
Not on hand, but I could come back with that information.
I'm just curious. That's fine. I can call you up sometime, or I can have a discussion with Councilmember McKee Cant. So, would you like to say something?
I don't have the percentages offhand after meeting last week, and we are not contributing to Art Sip and Stroll, but the other entities we are. And then I've also talked a little bit preliminary with the new town manager about whether or not this budget can be used for hotel staff training and retention, to use it to make sure that our hotels are selling and we're not leaving any money on the table by losing room nights.
Just a quick question
Mayor?
in there. So Councilmember McKee Cant is a member, and then the other member from the town is the town manager. Is that the two designees from the town of Yountville?
I believe so.
That's correct.
Thank you.
Anything else? Okay. Next.
Okay. debt service funds, agenda item 6D. We currently have 3 debt service funds included in the budget. One of them, the 2013 lease revenue bonds, Fund 53, is purely in here for historical purposes since it was refinanced in 2020. The 2017 lease revenue bond is also a refunding or refinancing of the previous 2008 lease revenue bonds that was for the town center construction project. And the refunding of that did result in significant interest cost savings over the life of the bond. Principal and interest payments together along with the fiscal agent fee payment that is due will be $544,293. And this is scheduled to be paid off in November of 2039. These funds are solely funded by the general fund contributions. The 2020 direct placement bond, placement financing bond is the refunding of the 2013 lease revenue bonds. And the total interest and principal payments will be $352,000. And on a positive note, we do not have to budget in the 23-24 budget a transfer from general fund into Fund 55 because of prior town council activity, basically using $300,000 of unassigned fund balance to prepay the 23-24 debt service. So that's a little bit of savings for the general fund, and this is scheduled to be paid off in June of 2027.
I just want to start off with a general comment. Because we have refinanced this debt, our interest rate is very, very low. And, with the interest rates we're seeing today, it's really wonderful that we did this. And, it's if the times were reversed and we had high interest rates, on these and low interest rates, then this would be something that, we could have a discussion about paying off. But right now, I kind of consider it like a free lunch. So this is really great that our debt service is so well being paid off at such really low interest rates. So
none of these are currently callable at the time, but there are options to prepay in the way that was done back in October of 2022.
Right. I'll entertain that when interest rates go in some other different direction. But right now, we're really wonderful how this is working. So any other questions? Councilmember McKee-Kent.
The slides that we've had in the last few sections that have been up here are different than we are totally separate and more encompassing than what we have in the book. It would be helpful to get a copy of these too.
Absolutely.
Okay.
Yes, I'll send this out.
Yeah, because bring it all together on one page. It's helpful.
Anything else? We'll move on.
Okay. All right. Agenda item 6E, impact fee funds. So past practice has been not to budget for impact fee fund or impact fee revenue because they are tied to development projects that can be hard to predict. They are charged to new residential and commercial developments, conversions, and expansions at the time of building permit issuance. Again, we do not budget for these because the number and timing of building permits is hard to predict. They do not have fund balance. We, at the end of each fiscal year, look at applicable projects that these can be funding sources for, and we transfer them out of the impact fee funds into the Fund 50 that houses the capital projects that they are applicable to. With the exception of the utility undergrounding impact fee fund. That does have a current fund balance because we have not had a utility undergrounding project that we could utilize those funds for. That is hopefully going to change in 23-24, as you'll see in the upcoming capital project slides. But we do anticipate that at the end of the next fiscal year, if those funds aren't utilized, we will have about $113,000 available. And it does continue to earn quarterly interest.
Any questions? I think everyone's an expert on impact fee. Oh, Councilmember Tripp.
At the last meeting, there was a mention of a $200,000 project for undergrounding And is that something, I think you said John's going to talk about, or Director Ferens is
That's
going
a
to speak to?
Perfect segue to
Okay.
our next section.
Thank you.
All right, capital projects funds, item 6F.
If we can, that slide. So capital improvement program, I'll go over in the upcoming slides the different projects we have that are funded by this fund. And this meeting, we're only going to focus on the civic facilities, community projects, drainage and flood control, parks and rec, and streets and transportation. Next slide. Capital Projects Fund 50. So we try to title the projects so they're kind of clear to understand what they are. But I'll go through some of the projects that we're going to be utilizing these funds for. The Vineyard Park Enhancement Project, that's to provide additional sidewalks, landscaping, some of the additional improvements at the Vineyard Park to the existing facilities. And even though we are utilizing Fund 50 projects, we are also actively seeking grant funds for various projects, and this is one of them. The Washington Park Street parking lot beautification. When we say parking lot, it's that gravel parking lot at the south end of town. We don't have an exact project for what we plan on doing there. We just know we want to do something there that still provides parking because it is very valuable parking for Veterans Park. So we have that project as well. Also, any grant funds we can find that could help us fund that, we'll apply for them. Washington Park / town facilities ADA improvements. Again, no specific plan or project to put ADA improvements in Washington Park. It's there because it is part of our transition plan to try to improve the accessibility in Washington Park and other town facilities. So that's there for us to look into. Permanent shade structure at the community center. We do currently have funds available for that, and we are actively looking into providing that much needed shade right in front of the community center where we have that concrete courtyard. Last fiscal year, we did the improvements to the community center, so now we want to provide the additional improvements such as shade structure. So hopefully that will go through this next fiscal year, and we'll have shade up there. Town hall landscaping and access improvements. So this is the landscaping improvements here in front of Town Hall, as well as altering the sidewalk and 88 corner ramp to provide direct access to Town Hall. And then this fund previously was used, the money was used for some of the items that we're currently using the Measure T, SB1, and gas tax funds for, that the interim town manager mentioned in previous slides. So this fund used to fund those items, such as the engineering, the paving improvements, and the concrete and sidewalk improvements. Next slide. So this is just a visual example of one of the projects we did with some of these funds, traffic calming. So we, on Yountville Crossroad at Yount Street, we included paint striping of extending the corner out so that the vehicles do not hug the sidewalk or hug the gravel when they're making that turn, because we do have a bike lane on Yountville Crossroad. And then we also use the money to improve the parking right in front of Community Center that used to be parallel parking, which didn't quite fit well, didn't quite meet the accessibility preferences, and it left a very wide turn on Washington Street. So providing angled parking there, it kind of traffic calms, so it keeps the lane a little bit narrower and provides a better design for parking. Next slide. Annual programs. So the ADA Accessibility Improvements Program, we use this money when we see different trip hazards or accessibility hazards around in our public facilities. So we will be using this money to do a lot of the sidewalk improvements in our parks where we find damaged sidewalk that needs improvement, or if we have a corner ramp that needs to be improved, any tripping hazards, any accessibility hazards, or even the accessibility parking stall. We currently have Veterans Park. We're working on that parking stall. GIS mapping improvements. With the update of our website, we hope to update our GIS mapping as well, where we put the various story maps or GIS facilities in our website so the public can access the projects we have going on in terms of geographical, so they can even potentially put in their address and see what types of projects or events are happening in those locations. Townwide drainage and erosion program. Interim town manager briefly talked about this. It's just used for townwide public facilities. Surveys and monuments and traffic calming. Traffic calming, we showed you the picture before. Surveys and monuments used for various things where we want to do ahead of a project, or we have right-of-way determinations that we need to make. We'll use this fund for that. Next
Can you
project.
just briefly inform the council about monuments? That might be something kind of new.
So monuments, survey monuments are, you can sometimes go on the road, you see a brass item in the road. Surveyors will use that to identify different property lines for their maps, and we use that for projects too, to make sure that we're making improvements to the public facilities in the public. Or private owners will use those monuments too. They hire their own surveyor to determine where their property lines are as well.
Thank you.
Next slide.
Did council want to talk about Fund 50 prior to moving to Funds 81 and 82?
Yes.
yeah.
But hold on a second. Councilmember Tripp.
I was just curious because it's a significant expenditure, the 160,000. Who actually? I mean, I understood what you said, that you could go online and look on what's going on in your neighborhood, but how much is that used, and who uses that? Because that's a fair bit of money.
We do have, so that's used for a lot of different things. We have an annual fee that we have to pay to ArcGIS to use the mapping. We have training provided for staff to go in and update the maps, and then the actual work that needs to go in to input all the information into the maps. ArcGIS is really valuable. You can do more than just mapping. You can create exhibits, but it really ties in. It's almost like Google Earth. You can go in, but you can add your projects to it. Okay. So that fund's there. I do have plans for that fund as well, where we want
it's really staff uses it. I'm sorry, I kind of misunderstood.
Yes,
okay.
Staff uses it.
Okay, I got, because I've seen that when you pull it up on the screen and you could see the whole thing, and yeah.
And it's available on public-facing side as well on the website.
Thank you.
Councilmember Reeves, did you have a question too? No. Okay.
Oh, I just have one question about the sidewalk work. Do you have like a running list of places where you're about to or need to?
Yes. So we do have a list that we have to put together and submit for different funds of what we're planning on addressing with those funds, sidewalk and ADA accessibility. However, if we are going around town on our regular duties and we notice that there's a sidewalk hazard that we missed, it wasn't on our list, we have the flexibility to address that sooner if it's not on the list.
So is the west side of Washington Street just right about where Villaggio Spa is, where the sidewalk is lifting up because of the trees?
So a lot of, I think the ambiguity is sidewalk in front of private properties is the responsibility of the property owner.
Oh, okay.
So when we see that, and we have seen that, we send notices to the property owners to say, we've encountered a hazard, you have a certain amount of time to fix it, and then we follow up. So we have sent notices out to Villaggio to inform them that they have hazards on their sidewalk in front of their property.
And do we make it clear that we want the sidewalk to be repaired without damage to the trees, because those trees are just starting to be great?
Yes.
Okay.
Any other questions? McKee Kent.
No question, just a comment that you, Director Burns, your team has been super responsive. We've had things at Veterans Park where I've seen people trip, concerts I've tripped myself and pointed it out, and you guys were on it, and it's really appreciated.
And this fund allows us to respond quickly and get those things repaired.
That's important.
Safety is always my number one. Any other questions before we move on? Vice Mayor.
Thank you. One question. So is this the opportunity we have, or should we have opportunity at our next meeting on the 28th? We're looking at capital project detail for this year. If we have any additional capital projects we want to discuss or add to this is now or next Thursday?
Now is definitely the time, and as you notice on the fund balance activity, this fund is expecting some grant revenue, so hopefully things will play out as we're hoping. If not, we may have to shift a little bit as far as expenditures. However, we are assuming that we will get the grant revenue and still have about $700,000 of fund balance available for council projects.
Additional beyond what you presented here in this proposed budget?
Yes, remaining available fund balance.
Okay.
You have thoughts?
Yes. So this has gone on maybe for a few years where I've talked to some residents about at the California Veterans Home about an ADA acceptable sidewalk. And we've gone back and forth and not really talked about it, but and we had a recent meeting with the administrator at the Veterans Home where she was satisfied that the white line on their street coming in from was acceptable for wheelchair accessibility. And so just recently I've talked with a couple members up there. I think they are working on a project through the Allied Council and a petition to petition the Veterans Home to work with the town of Yountville to see if there's a program or a potential project where we could create a safe ADA path, since the one they currently have along Domaine Chandon's is not acceptable, that we talk about that. And so my proposal is for us to put some type of funds in a capital project in potentially this next year for project development, funding, research, just to find out so we can begin a conversation, if that a conversation can occur, what the costs to the state or the town in combination or what to create an ADA accessible path between the top of the hill and down below. So that's my proposal, is that we're considering setting some money aside for project development, budgeting, to have on the table. So if I'm anticipating that we may see a petition from residents at the home to ask for this type of project, that we have funds available in the next fiscal year that we may or may not use, but have available for some planning purposes. And that's what I would be asking council then to consider, setting aside some funds, like $50,000. I saw that like for example, when we were planning the shelter, the shade structures in our budget here, it said we had set aside $50,000 for planning or budgeting, design, that we do something like that to have on the table if we are able to develop a relationship or conversation, potentially maybe with the new town manager, in conversation with the mayor and the council, talking about improving the path for residents at the home down to town and up and back again.
Town Manager Ferns, would you like to see you moving towards your microphone? You want to go first?
Sure. I think that allocating funds for this would be allowed because it's non-discretionary Fund 50 funds. The challenge would be right now, my understanding of that project to construct it would be $1 million plus. So it's a very expensive project to construct, and likewise doing the engineering and design associated with that is expensive. So I think absent that relationship and the relationship with the state, I don't know that it might be premature to do this, but if we think we're going to develop that relationship over the course of a year, then yes, I think some dollar amount could be placed in a project for the exploration of the idea of building that path.
And I had a recent conversation with Lisa Peak. This is something that is on their radar with a lot of other projects, and I would strongly, before we did any of that, you really have a conversation with her about that, because it was something that I would say from a brief conversation wasn't going to be acceptable to her. I think it's really going to require a little communication, but right now I really don't think that doing something like this is really going to possibly help push forward a positive relationship with the home. So I would kind of put that cart before the horse, before they, would say, or we would say that we're putting money aside to do something that's under your jurisdiction. I think we all want to have a good relationship with the home, so let's move in that direction first, because, any small amounts, if we can develop that relationship and have those conversations, and it would be something that they would be amenable to, and we need to talk to our town attorney about gifting local funds to the state. So it's a bit complicated. So I would say that, let's kind of move in that direction first, without possibly, disrupting it by letting a lot of people know we're trying to do something that we're really not ready to do without having all the right partnerships. That's my opinion.
And if I might add, Mayor, with a fund balance of $700,000 available to us in the coming year, we don't have to make the decision today, because that money is available, as Director King said earlier, mid-year, or when the opportunity presents itself, we can just bring a budget adjustment forward for a more specific project and for a more specific dollar amount.
So, and I appreciate that. I'm always, it's one point or another cautious about relationships, but at some point I think it's important, because I didn't sense from our conversation up at the Veterans Home that there was necessarily that they had an interest in it, but I also received contradictory information that members said as long as the town would pay for it, they'd be for it. So my purpose of bringing this up is to just present it, because I know there are residents up at the members of the home, residents of the town of Yountville, that are concerned they do not have a safe path to the town, and we need to take that concern seriously. And I think with the opportunity we have with a new when we have a new town manager come on board and developing relationships, that we can press that. And so I'm glad to see that we have funds available. So if we can, at a mid-year budget review, we could add these funds. If we can begin to a point of planning for that, then I'm not going to be adamant about adding it now. But I appreciate the time and the conversation, because I think we need to take it seriously about doing that. And I would hope that just this conversation today is talking about it, saying that we recognize the importance of the safe path, that we'll move in a positive direction with Veterans Home in Calvet. So,
Councilmember Reeves.
Anyone else has? I'm sorry.
I just wanted to accentuate what Councilmember Knight was saying, that I feel like there is a great need for that path. I walked that road to the Allied Council meeting last Wednesday, and I thought, wow, I don't think I would want to be on any kind of assistance device or even a cane to walk on the pathway. The road is hard enough. So I think it is a benefit to residents of the town of Yountville. So I would support possibly having the discussion in our upcoming workshops about what council priorities are and how to go about working with the Veterans Home or the people who are in the state level to try to work out some kind of arrangement with them.
And the only reason I also bring it up, Mayor, too, is that it's not pressing necessarily the relationship, but when the state is spending hundreds of millions of dollars and has contractors at the top of the hill that will be pouring hundreds of feet, if not hundreds of yards of concrete as they're finishing this skilled nursing facility up there. They have people there that could do this work, and so, I mean, I just think we should take the opportunity to encourage them to discuss how to improve the pathway when they have contractors on the property that could be added to their project. So anyway, thank you.
I would also
Member Tripp?
I would support what Councilmember Knight was saying, and I would be supportive because it is a complex issue given the jurisdiction and that at some level it's state land, it is state land, even though it's located in the town of Yountville. But maybe that points to all the more need to try to get some assistance in looking at how that kind of project could be funded or worked out. So I would be thinking it's not a bad idea to include a certain amount in our budget because it shows an intention. And although I understand the mayor's point that showing an intention might be taken badly at the vet's home, I also feel that who would argue with a good intention? So that would be, I would support that if we wanted to. We've deferred a lot of items till later in the year, and it's nice to have a placeholder in the budget that shows our intention. So I would support that idea, depending, of course, on what the rest of the council thought.
Well, I have had lots of talks with the administration, and I would just advise us to hold off a little bit because it is complicated, and sometimes just emails that go back and forth, I kind of hear about. So it's a bit delicate. I'm really doing what I can to kind of work through it. So I would really like to see us just hold off on that from now. Sending a message to our veterans right now that we have this set aside in our budget without, letting the administration know first. If you can just give me a little time to, work on that. I think that that's important. And it's, because of some conversations I've had that are definitely outside of this discussion today. So I really would hope, you can respect we go through the right channels because we are trying to form a new relationship here, and this is would be something that I could definitely say would not be helping that at all.
And I appreciate that, Mayor. I want to encourage and promote a good conversation with the Veterans Home. But at some point, this is a project for the whole town council, and the conversation has to be broadened so that the members, the residents of the Veterans Home and the members there know that we are actively working on it. And so I appreciate Councilmember Tripp's request. I'm willing to maybe wait and consider this conversation, as Councilmember Reeves said, that we could talk about it when we're doing some strategic planning or project planning, and I anticipate that is going to be much sooner than later, in the year. So, and I hope this conversation will be that the Veterans Home administrators will recognize the fact that we have this interest and that we're taking it seriously, and that we need to just find a way with a conversation with them and potentially with our state senator and state assembly member to help this project move along for the residents at the home. So thank you.
Councilmember McKee-Cant.
I recall from the ADA improvement schedule and timeline that we saw earlier in the year that one of the last projects on the list was the station just outside of the Veterans Home. I don't know what it's called. It's not the bus station exactly, but that is on like the last tier of the projects that was going to be looked at. So I was going to suggest if we could bring that forward, and I'll get that schedule. It's been a few months since we had that discussion, but maybe that could be something we could do just outside of the Veterans Home to make improvements. And then this is probably under state jurisdiction too, but our entrance into town, if you take the off-ramp from 29, on the right-hand side, butting up to the Veterans Park is probably, looks like 5 or 6 layers of pine needles and broken branches and things that are up against the fence there. So especially as we come into the summer season, fire safety is on everybody's mind. And as we have cars that back up there, I would hate to see whether somebody flicks a cigarette or some combustion there, but I think it might be state property. But if you take that exit and you look down there, it does not look like Yountville. It looks like we're in a forested area. So I think the other side of town, we have an older Yountville side too. I think we could do some capital improvements for both entrances into our town to pick it up a notch. And while I'm on fire safety, I know the creek schedule, the cleanup is always on your mind, but the creek behind Hotel Villaggio and, of course, behind Bartisono, not our property, but that doesn't mean to me that it's not our problem. And we did so much flood help with Bartisono this past winter because we had to, but now most of that stuff is sitting there and it's drying, and it's been there for several years. And then behind Villaggio, the fire hazards are great. And as we saw from the 2020 fires from St. Helena, it's creek beds and river beds where the fire was able to cross from Engwin to Spring Mountain because it traveled across the valley. So I'm just always looking at dry brush and feeling like we've got to push the hotels however we can do it. And whether we spend the money up front and make them responsible, I don't know. That's not my specialty, but we have to do something.
We have ongoing conversations with Bartisono/Hotel Yountville, and they've assured us that they're going to get in there and clean their portion up.
Because they've been trimming their trees for years from the PG&E lines, and they just put it on the creek bed on the opposite side.
Recently understand that from the flood wall that their responsibility is through the creek up to the flood wall. And so they've assured us that they're going to go in and clean that out now. And then we're having similar conversations with the new management of Estate Yountville, who are learning to appreciate the maintenance responsibilities associated with the Villaggio channel on their side of the Washington Street.
Great. I figured you were on it, but it's always on my mind because we walk those creeks all the time. And I don't know if there's anything that we can do for our entrances to spruce them up a little, but also to make them safe.
We can reach out to Caltrans and maintenance and tell them that they need to come in and clean it out.
Yeah, because it's just piled up to the fence and really bad. Thank you.
Mayor,
so just real quick, that is Caltrans property. We've done it in the past, and we've done as much as they would allow us, but it never hurts to keep that conversation.
I'm ready to get out there with a rake myself.
Believe me, I had a big group of people who wanted to, adopt a highway type of thing and clean it up. And I work through
and I know
MVTA.
Caltrans won't let you, right?
We have a Caltrans representative that comes to MVTA, and I had lots and lots of conversations, and she did too. It was just very, it was a no.
Our side of the fence is pretty good in comparison, but yeah. Thank you.
Agreed. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. Just following up with Councilmember McKee-Kent and the Villaggio Channel. So I saw that like in Measure A maintenance funds, it says Hopper Creek Improvement Projects, HOP 5, HOP 10, Villaggio Channel, and sedimentation basins. Is that Villaggio area, that ditch area where there is a lot of growth and plant, is that a part of Measure A where we can get in there and do some from cleaning or?
The Villaggio channel is all within their responsibility. So if you're standing on Washington Street and looking at the Villaggio channel, everything you see to the west is their responsibility.
So when Measure A lists Villaggio channel for funding projects eligible for Measure A funding, is that on a different part of the channel there, or where would that?
I would have to look into it and get back to you. I don't
please.
know. I don't know off the top of my head.
The channel that goes across the street and under the street and over to Bartisono, the waterway that's right by our station.
Yes.
Or the transfer station or the water station. So maybe it's just a
think-
small portion of that Bellagio channel. But I'd appreciate it if you could get back to that. Thank you.
And then I had one final question.
1 second, and then also to that, Fish and Game is very involved in all these conversations as well, and so there's just lots of parties, just so everybody kind of knows. Councilmember Tripp.
So I just wanted to ask on the utility undergrounding that's on the capital projects, the 200,000, is there a location for that?
Yes, we are looking at the portion of Mulberry that was not undergrounded with the original subdivision. So it's Mulberry from Washington, Ivy Court, and to Heather.
Washington, Ivy Court.
So that original,
Oh, okay.
the original Toyon Terrace subdivision was not required to underground, but you can see the rest of the subdivision was, and all the newer subdivisions on the east side of Washington were all required to underground. So that portion is of a size and scale that $200,000 will help us prepare the design effort for it,
Right.
and then we would need to seek a greater funding source to actually do the work.
Yeah, no, it's going to be a lot more expensive than that
Yes,
200,000.
absolutely.
I was just curious where
That's
it
the
was.
Just
planning and design.
Planning
effort.
and development.
Yeah, so it's just for that. And so luckily, since it's just planning, we don't have to reach out to PG&E yet, just to let the rest of council know. That's another, once it goes that far, there's a long wait time and a lot of frustrations mixed in. Any other questions on this? Councilmember Reeves.
Just as another addition to the capital improvement program, I'm wondering if it has been or is on the schedule later than 5 years from now to upgrade or redesign the south bathroom at the community park. With only 2 stalls, it's quite backed up on the weekends if you go to the park and try to use the restroom. I think it's a long wait, but I'm wondering if that has been considered as a project.
We have a near-term project to replace the roof on that restroom facility, but we have not had a conversation about upsizing it to a larger capacity facility.
Or maybe just improvements inside.
And we can certainly look at improvements inside.
Yeah. Well, maybe you could put that on the list. I think it's worth looking at.
So it's not going to help the backup if we just do improvements on the inside, so.
No, I
You
know,
would like the
but-
whole scope looked at?
Yeah.
Okay.
need to rent toilets.
Okay, I will put that,
I mean, we already do that for big events, but just for weekends, it seems like sometimes there's a real wait for that.
okay, well, scope out the whole thing. Vice Mayor.
And the only, I just would follow up with that. Councilmember Reeves' suggestion that maybe referring this to Director Holland and the parks, the commission as a part of their master park plan, that they may want to, they on a more regular basis will be able to tell us if there's a need. And it seems like if there's a lot of events there, that there could definitely be a need sooner than later to enlarge that particular bathroom. So I'd be interested in their perspective on it.
And since we're on topic of bathrooms, what I've heard people comment, maybe they've commented to the town as well, if we ever did anything to the bathroom at Veterans Park, especially I've heard it from women, they'd like it flipped around so that much the same entrances or the street side, they didn't always feel comfortable going around the backside.
Oh.
And so if it was a street side with more access, not really the access, but more view, they just felt like, if they went behind, it wasn't always, they didn't have a safety, it might be, they felt a little unsafe. So I'm not sure if there's any standards or anything about which way you enter a bathroom from, street side or not. But,
Recent experience has been to have the doors facing the park for parents who want their children to, if they have a group and they're on a blanket and one child needs to run to the restroom, if the door is facing the park, it's much more convenient than if the door is facing. And that's how we oriented the new restroom at the upper area for the community park, was oriented towards the playground for that reason.
Okay.
But we can certainly, we don't have a plan for that restroom at this time, other than a shade type thing for the west facing side of it to try to deal with the temperatures.
So I don't know if we ever went to 4 stall or 4 doors or something like that, maybe 2 on each side, but, I think it was mostly at nighttime. We're losing our public. I was just getting ready to take public comments, like too much bathroom discussion, but I'll assume that's no public comment. Thanks, Scott. Okay.
I had one more, Mayor.
Councilmember Tripp.
It'll be very quick. On the tot lot, I just wondered, John, if Director Ferns, if you could take a look at, I noticed we have 10,000 in here for the play service, but the thing that's occurred to me a lot from a liability perspective as I've chased a 2-year-old out to the street would be part of the park. It definitely has brush that stops a small child from running out to the street. But there are some areas where a very short fence might be appropriate to keep children from running out to the street. So again, there's probably not standards in a legal sense, but I'm sure park design standards. But I've actually had that exact problem, and it's occurred to me it might not be a bad idea to have a very short, unobtrusive fence in the areas that aren't covered by the landscaping, so the little kids don't run out to the street.
Okay, we can look at that. And we have certified park inspectors, so we can consult with them as well.
All right.
The tot lot, yeah.
Oh, one more item.
Councilmember Reeves.
One more item, and this is from these 5-year pages. And one item is the idea of a shade structure or shade structures in the North Park, and it's scheduled for 27-28, and I was hoping that the council might entertain the idea of moving that up a bit, because it has been almost 10 years since those trees were planted at the south end of the North Park, and they are not going to provide shade even in the next 10 years. And when I see people picnicking there in the summer, they're like hugging every piece of shade they can find. And it just feels like it's not very welcoming for the community or for visitors. So I would like to see shade of some sort. I mean, you go into Central Valley towns and every single picnic table has a shade structure over it, because it's just, health-wise, it's a good idea. And I feel like we could come up with something that would work there.
You want to comment? Because I've got some comments.
My comment would be is if a majority of the council wants us to move that sooner, we're happy to do that.
I'm all in favor of that, and since we're on the on that subject, the Oak Circle Park to me is just very uninviting because of the intense sun too. So take a look at, as long as we're looking at shade structures for parks. I don't know, and that again, I think it does need to maybe move to the Parks and Rec master plan. I haven't really seen it yet, but that park is very underutilized. I think the parking is great there, but it's always just, too sunny. And it just feels kind of sterile. I don't know. Maybe it needs some more trees or a shade structure. It's just, that one could really use some improvements too. So again, together with Parks and Rec people and Samantha. So I see a lot of shade nodding here, so I think we've got consensus. Both parks,
I'd support.
We're not necessarily putting money in for the other one. Just put it on your take a look.
So we'll move the shade structure at North Park into 23-24 at $150,000, And then we'll just add the Oak Circle Park to our forecasts going forward.
Yes, and then the potential tot lot. That's- Vice Mayor.
I was going to support that. If you were looking for a year, I was going to support that, moving that 150,000 to this new fiscal year, because I've had events with Kiwanis there in May or in August, May and August, but May's not too bad. But in August, that facility, North Park, is just, you cannot have an event without having to rent tents, because it's just very hot. So I'm glad to see us put it into this fiscal year, upcoming fiscal year. Thank you.
It might even be more expensive, but seems pretty 150. We'll see where you are. Anything else? Are we ready? Are we moving on? We are moving on. Okay, thank you.
Okay, Funds 81 and 82, these are to repair and or replace existing facilities within the town. A couple of the items that we'll highlight. Fleet replacement schedule. Last fiscal year, we did have money allocated to replace fleet with electric vehicles. So we have that in upcoming slides as well. But we do have existing fleet vehicles that are aged and definitely need repair or replacement, to the point where the repair probably would be costing more than the replacement. So we are looking to replace a lot of those vehicles. Roof repairs at Community Park and Vineyard Park restrooms. So we talked a little about the restrooms. Vineyard Park, we do have some other plans for that as part of the grant application as well. So that entire restroom, we have plans to do something to it, some form of improvement to it. Next slide. Go a little bit more into detail of some of the projects in the next slide. So these are some of the projects to our facilities that do need repair or replacement. We're trying to paint the different facilities, interior and exterior, and if we do improvements to, the exterior, such as landscape in front of Town Hall, painting the Town Hall exterior really kind of brings it all up to date. The sheriff's office has a lot of different damages to their desk areas, countertops, the walls, so we are putting some money towards doing some much needed maintenance in their offices. Community Hall restroom counters, we did a lot of the improvements at Community Hall, and so we also want to address the existing countertops in the restrooms. If you look, a lot of it's damaged, stained, very dated, so we want to get somebody in to do a full replacement of those restroom countertops. Again, some miscellaneous repairs and replacements at different facilities, our HVAC systems. One I kind of want to highlight is that barbecue storage area at the community center that isn't really used as a barbecue area. So what we plan on doing is officially making that a storage area that can be utilized a lot more efficiently than the unused barbecue area. And then some roof repairs to the different facilities as well. And those are Fund 81. Fund 82 is where we're trying to get some electric vehicles into our fleet. So we're starting out with vehicles that admin staff can use, and other staff, but are GEM vehicles. So those are going to be all electric, and it's a lot more efficient to hop in a GEM vehicle for a meeting or to check some field issue than to have to pick up one of the pickup trucks and go just across town. And then we are actively looking for e-vehicle possibilities for our courtyard fleet. Those are in high demand, so availability is an issue. Procurement is a little bit of an issue, so we are actively looking to do that, but at the same time, we know we do need to replace some of the vehicles, even if they're not e-vehicles. So there'll be some parallel replacement of standard vehicles with e-vehicles, and then standard vehicles with just improved vehicles. Any questions on those two funds?
Question exactly on 82. So even, so it's what you're saying that the vehicles that we need replacing now, we cannot replace them with electric vehicles because of availability.
On a couple of them. So we want to do some of the trucks that we have, that we definitely want to try to get an e-truck.
Right.
And those, unfortunately, are very far out. So some of the availabilities from dealerships, at least a year out, and then trying to contract with dealerships with, public funds. So we're meeting a couple of different obstacles there, but we are going to move forward with it, even if we go through the procurement process, we're able to secure a vehicle but have to wait a year to get it. We are still trying to do that process.
Okay, so you can put your name on a wait list like anybody else who goes and buys a car.
Yeah.
That's not there. So how many trucks are you replacing that would be gasoline right now, and how bad are they, and could we wait at all? I know there's a repair cost. This is again, I always like the big ticket items, not that, well, it's big ticket. It's big ticket in terms of climate action, that, because transportation is pretty much number one. So what could
we definitely are trying to do that. So those GEM vehicles,
right?
The public works staff here at Town Hall have an old pickup truck that we're trying to discontinue use of, and so that's replaced one of the GEM vehicles.
Okay.
And then our part-time staff member who cleans out the trash bins around town,
right,
he'll be using a GEM vehicle as well instead of the pickup truck that he's using.
And they're available.
The GEM vehicles?
Yeah.
Yes, we have them ordered, and the delivery schedule is still set for late June, early July. So we potentially will have them for our use end of June, early July.
Okay. Yes. Interim manager.
For acquiring the pickup truck, so we do have a fleet replacement schedule with Fund 82. So we've identified, we know the years and age of each vehicle, so we have a schedule for replacement. And for the non-heavy duty trucks, the half-ton or three-quarter-ton pickup trucks that are available in an EV format, we are trying to replace those as we can. Our challenge is twofold. Number one, it's our procurement process. So we can't just put our name on a waiting list. We have to go through a public bidding process and get various dealers to give us a quote on an electric truck. And then once we go through that process, we'll be on their list to when the truck becomes available. So it's, in the meantime, the trucks that would be replacing are still in a good enough condition that we continue to use them until the EV truck becomes its replacement.
So what I think, and we'll hear from the other council members too, I think what we're looking for is, trying to go electric as soon as possible. If there's anything we need to do from a budget perspective or policy perspective, but it just seems like right now it's a availability issue. It's not a money issue at all.
Correct.
Okay. Any other? Okay. Council members, 81 and 82.
I have a question.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And my mic's on. Capital Fund 82, it says we have 29 vehicles and equipment, and I appreciate on the other page we have the fleet replacement schedule. And so there, on the top of it, it says replacement date 2021. So those two vehicles were replaced, or we're still going to do that because they're 2008, 2005 vehicles. So do we buy used vehicles, or did we delay replacing those during COVID?
Those have been replaced. I don't have that schedule in front of me, but I believe if they were.
So those vehicles, the 2008, 2005, don't exist anymore because we've replaced them in 1920 and 2021?
Yes.
Okay.
Correct.
So, so it says we have 29, and I just added up that list. So maybe this is an old list. It only showed 18 vehicles, and 5 of them are equipment. Forklifts, mowers, bucket trucks, dump trucks. So there was like 10 or 12. I was just curious. I'm just wondering, in terms of maybe long-term climate action or something, do we think about maybe reducing our fleet and not having 29 vehicles for the town, that we could do with less in terms of our use in town?
We have not looked at that specifically, but we can look at that. But I believe that we do not have an excess of vehicles right now. So the vehicles that we have and the equipment that we have is used daily. And we currently have 2 pickup trucks that are non-functional, and we're not planning on fixing them because they're part of the schedule to be replaced with EV trucks, and as a result, we have staff members sharing trucks that they normally wouldn't share, and trying to work around the lack of access to those 2 extra ones that are broken.
So typically, staff will have a truck for themselves versus if they're out on a project where they're working, they might have a shared truck or something like that.
So
just 29 trucks. Just generally, it kind of pops in terms of a town. In a smaller town, it seems like a lot of equipment. Even though specific ones, I'm sure you use when you need them. Bucket truck, dump truck. There's the Vactor truck, and then obviously forklifts and mowers that you need as needed. But there's just a lot of vehicles in that list, and it was short, and there was only 18 here, and it says there's an additional 10 more. So I was just
we can look at that and verify, but right now, the people that work at the treatment plant don't have a truck assigned to them that doesn't get driven daily. It's not like there's 3 guys that largely work at the treatment plant daily, and they share one available truck if they need to go about town to do something. So we don't have a truck assigned to every person, and so I would have to look. It also includes one of the vehicles is the Prius for the Parks and Rec department. So but we can certainly look at it and verify that we have the number that's appropriate for our needs.
Yeah.
But on any given day, there is not a fleet of town vehicles that isn't being used or being parked and not driven.
And I appreciate that. I want them to, I want the staff to have the equipment they need and to work efficiently. It's just that I thought over the years, maybe we've just kind of built up, this number reflected a built up of equipment that that there might be some we don't use and all that. And so just as we move forward and are purchasing, electric vehicles and all that seem like may have a shorter lifespan, I don't know, than a gas-powered vehicle in terms of battery and all that we're just being considering how many vehicles we really need when we're investing in the electric vehicles. And
If I could add just a little more information to this fleet replacement schedule. Part of the discrepancy might be that this schedule is what's applicable to the fleet replacement program, which is general fund supported. And so the other 10 or so vehicles are most likely water, wastewater vehicles and equipment, which would then be replaced using water, wastewater funding.
Okay. And you would have a fleet replacement, equipment rental replacement program in those enterprise funds that would cover setting aside money to purchase few ones in the future? Or?
We don't necessarily have replacement funds in the utility enterprise funds. I think they would come forward as a project when needed.
All right, thank you.
Mm-hmm.
Questions?
The wastewater and water trucks are on that large list too. We don't have, at the next council meeting, you're not going to see another list of more vehicles for the water and wastewater enterprise. They're all included in that list.
Okay.
Any other questions? 81, 82? Okay, we're moving on.
Okay. That is actually all of the funds that we are going to be discussing today. So we do have a slide about the changes that were incorporated between the last budget workshop on May 4th and now. And it stemmed mostly from conversations during budget workshop number 2. First, we increased the anticipated fire tax credit in Department 013201 for fire and emergency medical services from $228,000 to $272,000 proposed for next fiscal year. And that's based on the estimate that we got from the county about receiving about $269,000 in the current year. So we felt it was appropriate to bump that up. We increased the expenditure for the open house or meet and greet events from $5,000 to $10,000 per council direction. We increased planning department contract services from $10,000 to $60,000 for additional on-call specialty consultants. We did increase the budget for property tax revenue. To date, in this current fiscal year, we have received $2.4 million. So we increased the proposed revenue for 23-24 by $258,000 based on current year actuals. So we didn't escalate that amount, but we felt safe proposing that we would receive about what we have received in this current fiscal year. So that is quite a bump in general fund revenue, and could be thought about for potential use if there are other general fund related projects that council would like to maybe bring forward in the final budget workshop. We removed the $5,000 for cleanup day that was budgeted in the non-departmental general fund department because it is budgeted in Fund 29, so that was double budgeted, and we cleaned that up. We increased the assigned for legal contingencies to $250,000. That's an additional $50,000 in case we need to use wonderful attorney Gary Bell a little bit more in the next fiscal year. We added $25 a month for deferred compensation for town council members, as we do have council members who are starting to utilize that benefit that is approved per resolution 19-3546. And we did slightly reduce the building permit and plan check revenue to better align with current year actuals and what we think, permit activity may be reflective of in the next fiscal year. Next steps will be budget workshop number 4 on Thursday, May 25th, again here in the council chambers at 1 p.m. We will be looking at enterprise funds, water and wastewater, fiscal policy review and discussion, and we will have a final general fund review where we will display the final proposed general fund summary and be able to talk about any other general fund items at that point.
So one item I wanted to bring up for council discussion, it would go under the town council department. And the reason I'm bringing it up now, we didn't bring it up at May 2nd, the very first meeting, was because it's about SB 329. This was the Bill Dodd law about council salaries, and it was right at the 11th hour. It was for charter cities, but then when it got approved, it was for general law cities. So I wanted to maybe bring up that during our physical policy review and discussion that we do have then we can also have Gary weigh in on a report, or you can kind of talk to him about how we have a process that we have a resolution as part of our ordinance, just make sure that the council's all up to speed on how that works, and we do that in non-election years, so that we'll need to sometime during this year, probably or the next before November 2024, make sure that kind of comes back, and we've got to make sure we budget for that. It's up to a 5% CPI, so we have to know that process, and we want to make sure that that gets put into the budget. And there are some, other personnel changes that probably are outside of the budget, although they reflect money in terms of, in lieu for insurance and how that's all working. That should not have any budget impact. But I think we need to review all of that. And finally, the last item is consideration of, instead of just, I was meeting with all the mayors throughout the valley, and this is something we actually had as a council benefit in 2008, and I think it stopped in 2009. It was just a council vote, but actually considering. And this, again, stems from looking at Bill Dodd's Law, 329, really having a benefit of not just the council member for medical, but actually the council member, in a family or at least a spouse. All the other jurisdictions have that now. It's not going to be a major financial impact, but, I think it does, again, going back to the law that, Bill Dodd has kind of put in, made me think a lot about, future councils, and we all know we don't make a lot of money, so we can be, we won't really have, trying to up our salaries to a living wage, which, he was bringing up, that will never happen. But, maybe this additional benefit could, really help recruit some council members, who really rely on insurance they can't get any other way, that, maybe they, could find maybe a spouse could work or something like that, as they could serve on council. So I think it's a good possible benefit that, we could kind of talk about as council members, and especially at budget time. So maybe if everybody was agreeable to at least, put it into the budget and see, what that kind of did to that council, the town council department. I don't know. What do you think? I see some head shaking. Is that?
Can you explain, Mayor? I know SB 329 in general allowed, I think it's an allowed and not a mandated increase in compensation for council members. Could you just recap sort of where that is and whether that's an option for us?
Well, basically, our option is our own option. This was just kind of a law that I was kind of ignoring because it kept saying charter cities, and Napa's the only charter city. And then the last minute, it was a general law city, which was a surprise. But it doesn't really apply to us because we have this separate mechanism already in place that's been in place for a while, and that's what one thing we'll review. So it's really for city councils who don't have this other mechanism, which is by resolution, and when we decide to do it, so right now we only do it in non-election years, so it's every other, but, we could change that too if we wanted to.
I thought there was some substance to this law, and I thought that the law allowed for an increase that wasn't otherwise allowable now in the compensation. Am I wrong about that? I thought that was the meaning of the law, that it allowed us to increase our compensation at the council's determination to an amount that was not previously permissible. Have I got that wrong?
It was previously, in some cities who don't have these other mechanisms that we do, had it fixed based on the old state law. It was $300 a month. So, but, and that was charter cities, but this new law applies to our cities as well. But we can change our own mechanism to anything that we have. So this law doesn't really apply to us because we've already set up policies on how we determine council salaries. So it was there for a law in case certain cities were following that and still, only were limiting their council salaries to $300 a month.
Okay, well, maybe I misunderstood. I thought the amount that we received, which I think is and you could correct me, $700 a month or something, or $600, was the most that was permissible under state law. You're saying that all along the town of Yountville could have made a decision to pay council members more? I thought that it was limited by the law in terms of what Yountville could. I know the mechanism. I understand the mechanism. Right. I'm talking more about the amounts.
Yeah, no, the mechanisms that we put in place, which is, in our ordinance every other non-election year, that's something the council put in place, and then we enact that by resolution.
Right.
And so we will need to bring that resolution back, but
so notwithstanding Bill Dodd's law, but I'm just picking a number, by resolution, previously it could have been determined to pay the council $2,000 a month is what you're saying. It just was that Yountville didn't opt to do that. I thought, Bill, that wasn't permissible previously, and that's what Bill Dodd was changing.
Only to certain cities who thought it wasn't. But
okay.
We looked into it. I don't know. We probably did this, I don't know. Celia, do you remember, was it 8 or 9 years ago?
I believe the last resolution was in 2019.
Yeah.
So basically, Bill Dodd's law doesn't really change anything for
That's
Yountville?
certainly my understanding, but we're going to check with Gary Bell.
Check with Gary and bring
I've sent him the resolution and the ordinance, and but we'll kind of bring that back as well. But it's and we didn't do it in 21 because of COVID. So that's what we decided at that time, because staff wasn't getting COLA at the time, so we passed on that as well. So Councilmember McKee-Kent.
Something that the paper had reported on with regards to Bill Dawes' law was cost of living, and that it had not been looked at since the 1980s. So, and then I think currently salaries were tied to the populace.
These are for, again, charter cities, and
That's
a lot
charter,
of them
okay.
who followed it strictly and didn't, do something else internally, and were just following that state law. Then they gave quite a big of an escalator, because those salaries were capped at $300 a month.
Okay.
And I know, even though Napa's a charter city, they certainly pay their council members and mayors significantly higher than anything that the Up Valley cities are getting. But, I am not pushing that. I'm just, suggesting. It looks like we're all in agreement about having at least insurance benefits for a council member and a spouse.
Yes, we can include that.
Okay, that will be great. So that's what I would like to add to that previous slide. Anything else that?
And then the whole question of, apart from spouses, the option of, for people who already have insurance that
right.
works for them, the town allows employees to, if you have a spouse who's already insurance, you could get $500 in lieu of insurance, which is, for council members, that was also an option, and how to make sure that that's available, because at the end of the day, it tends to actually cost the town less to reimburse you the $500 than to buy you health insurance. So it's not a detrimental thing. So I would like to include that with the idea of also including spouses.
Yeah. So that is currently a benefit. I'm not suggesting that go away.
Actually, it's no longer permitted as a benefit.
Well, it's going to be reimbursable for medical expenses. So
But currently, as designed, it's no longer permitted as a benefit.
This month, correct. Director Ferns, or Town Manager Ferns. Sorry. It's like,
We are learning a lot about what you were talking about this week.
right.
And we are planning on bringing that item forward as an administrative item on the June 6th meeting.
Oh, okay, great.
And so our plan would be to include numbers in the budget in anticipation of, well, I shouldn't say in anticipation, but to allow for a decision to include a spouse on your insurance. And then we also have some other town council member benefit issues that you're discussing that we need to clean up. And we do that by resolution. So we'll bring an item forward on the June 6th meeting to clarify all of this information, explain it, and then have a proposed resolution to solidify it after the discussion.
But we're not going to plan on the resolution for raising our salaries, because under the current policy, that can't happen until November 24.
Correct.
So we're just going to wait on that. We're not.
Correct.
No need to do that now.
Correct.
Well, there's need. No.
Well,
Although, Mayor, just not to be argumentative, we could change that, right? We could change that resolution.
yes, no, it could, and that's why.
Right now, it's 24, but
well,
we could change that if we wanted to.
We could add that to our next agenda to review that current policy, because it's linked to the budget. Is that correct? Or is that something we should put on our June 6th agenda?
It should be the June 6th agenda.
Okay.
And
Yes.
the town attorney will be available at the June 6th agenda to discuss it
Explain
further.
all that. And I think that any changes we would make would probably have a minimum impact on the budget
Yes.
anyway. So it
Correct.
wouldn't be. Okay. We're all clear how that's going to go and what we're going to do. All right. So anything else that we kind of skipped or we want to talk about? Maybe you can go back to that previous slide. So this is what we're doing now, is kind of updating this. Vice Mayor.
Thank you. And that's what I was going to reference. But first I wanted to thank Director King for being thoughtful enough to add this next budget meeting next Thursday, because I think this has gone very well, and enterprise funds are complicated, and having the time to spend reviewing enterprise will be beneficial to have an extra day. But I was just not for a conversation today, but maybe just for council members to think about in terms of other things. In our last budget meeting, we went through community promotions pretty quickly, and I missed what I wanted to was an opportunity to consider us in this next fiscal year. We zeroed out small project grant programs. That was, I think sometimes they were called happy grant programs, or years ago when I was on the council before, where we provided grants to nonprofits that I would call it more now a pay it forward program, where nonprofits like Napa Emergency Women's Shelter and Little League, and at that time the museum came forward asking for funds. And I would like for us to maybe think about and consider potentially putting funds back into small project grant programs where we can encourage organizations, or where we can provide some funds, grant funds, to either individuals to do projects in town, which in the past I think some of these ones have created some residents developed some creative ideas to promote, to benefit the community, but also consider the fact that post-COVID, a number of nonprofits may need support that we may be able to contribute to. And I only bring it back because I think looking in California cities news, I was reminded of this because, like, I think Cupertino or something had designated $150,000 for pay it forward grant programs for nonprofits in their community or region. And I'd like us to consider that in a conversation at the next meeting about doing that again and providing some grants to organizations that benefit residents and do things that as the town can't do. So, but to nonprofits. So anyway, thank you.
And I'm open to that discussion, but I think what we also need to do is kind of revisit. We used to have that program, and maybe it was because of the policy that we had. It was just, we started getting into a lot of requests from residents. There was like, one, for example, that they, wanted funds for the ballet school in Napa to replace their floor, and some of the kids in Yountville. So, I think that, a bigger discussion that really would outline more clearly the types of funding, the nonprofits we would kind of consider. So it really didn't. So what we were ending up doing was kind of looking at all the applications, and then we had so much budgeted, and we would just kind of divide by 7 or something. So, but it wasn't really well outlined before, who could really, receive the funds and the purpose of the funds. And so we got all stymied all the time about, does this qualify? Does that qualify? But, and people would come and plead for stuff that, I sometimes really felt it was outside of the scope of the intent. So I think that is something that I would be in favor of if we really had a really good discussion about the policy first. So,
and I agree. I agree, Mayor, we should talk about that. It's just, it wasn't easy. I mean, 20, 25 years ago when Little League and Napa Valley Museum and Napa News came to us, that it was difficult to get $50,000 worth of funding requests, and we could only fund $25,000.
Right.
But that's what we're here to do. So I mean, and we provided needed funds to groups that needed it, that needed something in the short term, and we were, I think, at best, even that term wasn't used back then, we were paying it forward, and so it wasn't easy, but I think it's something we should discuss and consider again.
And again, are we going to have, limits? Are we going to have parameters about this? I mean,
It wasn't
I think
fun.
Yeah, I know. But
It wasn't easy, but we still figured out a way to provide some funds for some
right.
groups.
So I think, having some idea of what that is going to help us figure out a financial placeholder to do that on a yearly basis.
So, yeah.
Not getting
pending
the cart
po-
before the horse, but yeah.
No, pending policy discussion, and
Right.
then as we've said several times today, once that policy is in place, you can do a budget adjustment to
Right.
fund that, whatever decision you make about that. So, I mean, we don't have to make that funding decision today. We can have a longer policy discussion in the future, and then you can fund it shortly thereafter.
Does that sound fine?
No, I think I probably will bring it up next week, because I think we could set some money aside, and if there's a majority of the council wants to do that, and then we can figure out policy afterwards, because I know there's groups in this valley that have struggled through COVID, and this is budget, so it's not policy conversation, that could use some funds to help them transition transition after COVID. So just a thought. I only brought it up. I'll bring it up again next week and see when we have a little more time to talk about it. Thank you.
Vice Mayor Knight, just to add to that, as having been part of assisting the council with the original small projects grant program that we created, we did have some parameters to help assist how to distribute that money. It was also an ad hoc committee that became a standing committee. So we'll be bringing at the next meeting, again, the council appointments with the different bodies, just so we can add the alternates, and we can consider adding potentially another ad hoc committee for that specifically, so that way it can help the council kind of smooth everything that you're looking for, which is creating policies and just a way to assist these nonprofits create or get funding.
No, I appreciate that. So we will bring up that committee assignments at the next meeting?
Correct.
Okay, good, because I knew at some point we needed to talk about Napa Valley Unified School District 2x2 committee issues, so thank you.
The next regular meeting, not the next budget meeting, but at
No,
the
next
June
council
6th
meeting.
council,
That's fine.
regular
That's
scheduled
good. I'm
council
glad
meeting.
it's agendized. Thank you.
And so our next meeting, I'm not adjourning quite yet, I'm just going to make a statement. Our next meeting is May 25th at 1, and I think we were very successful in getting things done today before 4. And just so you know that my intent, we are going to stay here until the sun sets and finish our budget on the 25th, no matter what, because it has to go back. Finance has got a lot of work to do, because we really want to, we're planning on passing the budget on June 6th.
That's the plan.
That's the plan. So therefore, May 25th, we'll just see how it goes, but the 4 o'clock deadline the clock might keep going, because we're going to keep going till we're done. Is that acceptable to everybody?
Not just acceptable, I'm looking forward to it.
All right, there we go. We have great enthusiasm. Budget discussions always are very enthusiastic. I just don't know where the public, should be here. They're a lot of fun. So, yeah.
And then I'd just like to add, it was really a lovely job that's been done so far, so thank you. And I really liked the slides.
I know.
Very
Yes.
helpful.
Yes, and I will email these to all the council.
Thank you.
All right,
Should
great.
we get updates for these binders, or?
Yes, if you want to leave them with me, we will update them for the 25th. They should be ready by tomorrow morning-ish.
Little elves working overnight?
Yeah.
Late nights.
Thank you.
Okay, so with that, those are my closing comments. That unless anyone else has some, May 25th, 1 o'clock, until we are complete. So, and we are now going to adjourn then to this meeting. We're talking about Budget Workshop 4, the first ever, on Thursday, May 25th at 1 p.m. Can I get a motion and a second?
I move adjournment today's meeting to the next meeting a week from now.
I'll second.
Hold on, I'm closing lots of
I
stuff.
already closed
Give me-
my computer, so I just have to vote yay.
It's, I want to see if it'll actually work. Let's see.
You will just move the pages we have left notes on just over to the left side then, so please.
be affected.
Thank you.
So Vice Mayor Knight, I take your vote as a yes, and same for you, Councilmember Tripp?
Yep, yes.
Did mine come through?
It did.
What's the
No, it
difference?
didn't. Okay.
Wow. Okay. As soon as we find out the vote.
Sorry, I know you're all waiting breathlessly.
This is last year's budget. This is this.
It is not, actually.
This tree that
Hit refresh.
anywhere is dead.
Yep, it's not popping on my screen for some reason.
This tree is not anywhere as healthy as it was.
That's the one.
I don't know when we talked. This one.
Oh,
Yeah. Excuse me.
No? Okay. I can register as a yes.
Adjournment passes unanimously. Good afternoon, everybody, and we'll see you next.
Thanks to everyone.
Thank you.